Figured out. All right. Yeah, please keep it up.
Okay, well, good morning, everybody. We're here today to announce a major step forward in our work to protect troopers and emergency responders on our roadways. I want to thank Acting Director Brendan Kelly for his leadership on this issue over the past several months. His dedication to protecting our troopers on the job will save lives and make our communities safer. I'm really grateful for his service. I also want to acknowledge the dedication of Senators Tony Munoz and L.G. Sims and Representatives Marcus Evans, Tim Butler, John Cabello, and Jay Hoffman. This legislation would not be possible without all of them bringing attention to this issue and coming together in a bipartisan fashion to address it. This year alone, 16 troopers have been struck while doing their jobs to protect drivers on our roadways. 16 troopers. For Trooper Brooks Jones Story and Trooper Christopher Lambert, it cost them their lives. There are a few times that this office weighs heavier on me than when we lose one of our finest. The calls to comfort the families, the funerals laying our heroes to rest. There have been too many. I believe today's announcement is an important step in the right direction, and we do it in memory of Trooper Jones Story and Trooper Lambert and every emergency responder that we've lost. As you know, Scott's law says that drivers approaching a vehicle with their hazard lights must slow down and move over. The legislation we're announcing today enhances penalties for those who don't obey Scott's law and puts measures in place to raise awareness for those who don't even know what Scott's law is. In particular, this extends penalties to those who cause injuries or worse to emergency responders, to law enforcement officials, and to authorized persons on our roads. This law also raises fines for those who commit multiple offenses, and revenue from these fines will go directly into the Scott's Law Fund to educate drivers and keep people safe on the roads. Finally, we're announcing legislation to create the Move Over Task Force. This new task force will study violations of our Move Over laws to understand why they continue to happen and to propose ways that we can do a better job of protecting authorized personnel on our roads. These measures are an important step forward, and I truly believe they will help. But we cannot do this alone. Our troopers and our first responders put their lives on the line every single day. We cannot keep them safe on the road without help from the driving public. No driver needs to get to their destination so quickly that they need to put at risk the life of an emergency responder. So slow down. No one needs to be texting on the road, so please put down your device and pay attention. People's lives are at risk. It's the very least that we can do to support our state troopers and emergency responders in their critical work. It's the very least that we can do to keep the people safe who keep us safe. When you see an emergency vehicle on the side of the road, slow down. Pay attention, obey the law, and move over. And now I'd like to turn it over to our ISP Acting Director, Brendan Kelly.
Sweet. Good morning. On behalf of the men and women of the Illinois State Police and all law enforcement across the state, welcome to the ISP to discuss the importance of the Move Over Law, otherwise known as Scott's Law, and to remind all drivers of the hazards emergency personnel and disabled motorists face while on our roadways every single day. Sadly, the Illinois State Police has lost 3 troopers this year: Trooper Christopher Lambert, Trooper Brooke Jones Story, and Trooper Gerald Ellis, in completely preventable traffic crashes which occurred while all 3 troopers were on duty protecting and serving the residents of this state. Two of these fatal and tragic crashes involved violations of the move over law. As you all know, in 2002, the state of Illinois enacted the move over law in honor of Lieutenant Scott Gillen of the Chicago Fire Department, who was struck and killed in December of 2000 by an intoxicated driver on Interstate 94 while assisting at a crash scene. This law requires motorists approaching stopped emergency vehicles with their emergency lights flashing to slow down and move over, changing lanes if possible to make extra room. In January of 2017, the law was expanded to include any stationary vehicles with their hazard lights flashing. This year alone so far, as the governor mentioned, 16 Illinois State Police troopers have been struck while on duty as a result of Scott's law violation, including troopers Christopher Lambert and Brooke Jones Story, who tragically lost their lives. This year-to-date number is higher than the number of all ISP crashes of this sort that occurred in all of 2018 and all of 2017. The injuries sustained by the surviving troopers varied from minor injuries to more severe injuries, including compound bone fractures. I'd also like to note that this problem is not only an Illinois State Police problem. This problem, the failure to obey the law and slow down or move over, affects emergency personnel, construction workers, first responders, and members of the general public all across the state and nation. Keeping all drivers on Illinois roadways safe, including our police officers and first responders, is and will always be a top priority for the ISP. So far, this year, Illinois State Police troopers have written over 2,000 citations for move-over violations, and this is more than 6 times the amount of citations written at this time last year, more than twice the number of citations written in all of 2018. We will continue to educate the public on the dangers of violating this law, and we will continue enforcing this law. We are confident that with the public's cooperation, we can save lives together. I was just driving up this morning, up Interstate 55, and saw a lady put her brakes on. I was right behind her. She put her blinker on. She moved over to the other lane, and as we headed down the road, I saw a trooper on the side of the road performing a motorist assist. So I pulled alongside her, gave her a thumbs up, but she didn't see me because she was texting. So yeah. Progress, baby steps, one step at a time. So keep your eyes on the road. Don't drink and drive. Obey the speed limit. And if you see an emergency vehicle with their lights activated, please slow down and move over. Our troopers, all first responders, emergency personnel, and all law enforcement leave their homes every day, go to work, and risk their lives to protect you and I. Please do your part to protect the people who took an oath to protect you. Make responsible driving choices. Follow the law. This year, we have felt the bitter harvest of too few respecting the spirit and letter of this law. Along with the pictures of my wife and children in my office sits the photos of Chris, Brooke, and Jerry, troopers that were all lost just this year. The pain and sadness is still fresh, but sadness is not enough. There have been many memorials, but memorials are not enough. There is righteous anger, but anger is not enough. We all have to act. Along with greater enforcement and education, this legislation represents action. And I'm very grateful to the governor for his leadership on this. I know this has personally affected him. It's had an impact on him, and I can see it every day how important it is to him, the safety of the men and women of the Illinois State Police and all first responders. And I want to thank my own representative, Representative Jay Hoffman, and for his efforts in this, all the representatives and senators that are here. I just recently found out that Senator Munoz went to the seminary before he decided to join the military and then become a police officer. So we answered a different kind of call, but even though he didn't get to become a bishop or a cardinal, he is certainly the patron saint of law enforcement in the General Assembly because of the issues that he continues to fight for every day, and I'm very grateful for that. 40 years ago, no one wore seatbelts. Change for the better, change that saves lives is possible. So help us protect those who protect all of us. So thank you very much. And with that, I will turn it over to Representative Marcus Evans. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Kelly, and of course, thank you, Governor Pritzker, for the messages being sent to all our first responders that we care in Illinois. I'm proud to be the chief House sponsor and working along with Leader Jay Hoffman and all of the colleagues in the Illinois General Assemblies on the House of Representatives side, because we're here today to say enough is enough. The 3 first responders have lost their lives while working on our roadways, and we're cracking down on reckless drivers to prevent more senseless tragedies. This legislation increases the minimum fine to $250 for a first violation of Scots law and to $750 for a second and subsequent violation. It also adds a $250 assessment fee for any violation and directs those funds into the Scots Law Fund. This new fund will be dedicated to producing driver education materials so everyone knows what to do when they see a first responder on the road. This is about education. This is about spreading the word. Slow down and move over. This legislation will keep our brave public servants safe and save lives. So thank you again, Governor Pritzker, for sending a message out to our first responders, and I'm proud to turn it over to the chief sponsor in the House, Senator Tony Munoz.
Thank you, Representative. Good afternoon. To our governor, thank you, Governor, for your leadership to law enforcement and your commitment to keep everyone safe. To my colleagues in the House, thank you. For the last couple of weeks, we sat together going over the enhancement penalties of the bill, as well as our senators, and this is a bipartisan bill. We have representatives and senators from both sides of the aisle, so thank you. And to the men and women who serve not only as state troopers, but as police officers throughout the great state of Illinois, you are truly heroes for what you do on a daily basis. And this common sense law that's been in the books for a number of years is, just, to me, common sense. When you see lights flashing, slow down and pull over. Go to the left. Simply, that's all you have to do. It's a shame that we had to come in and put some enhancement penalties in this. Hopefully, people will realize that they can go to jail for this and pay some hefty fines. But not only that, you can seriously hurt someone or even kill them. It's a shame, as our acting director said, that there's 3 lives already. And guess what, ladies and gentlemen? There's nothing we can do. They gave the ultimate sacrifice, and their family is going to pay that commitment for the rest of their lives. The only thing I can say to the men and women, thank you for what you do for us to keep us safe. If we can help out in any way, this is the small token of our gratitude. I say thank you from the bottom of my heart to the men and women who gave the ultimate sacrifice. God bless you. And we will always keep you in our hearts and take care of your families. Thank you. Now, Representative Cabello.
Good afternoon. This was it's a bittersweet day because we see the fruits of long negotiations in a bipartisan manner, but we're also reminded of why we have to do this. I'd like to thank Governor Pritzker. I'd like to thank the House Democrats, the House Republicans, the Senate Democrats, and the Senate Republicans, because we all came together and we saw an issue and we decided that we needed to act, and we needed to act today. As the only active policeman in the chamber, it is something that I feel very strongly about. When talking to Robert Story, the husband of Brooke Story, who was killed 30 miles away from my house, and who I knew both of them, it gives us some closure. Once this bill passes, and hopefully it will pass with a unanimous vote in both chambers, it will show the families that we actually care. It will show the families that we are ready to protect the protectors. And that's what this General Assembly is doing right now. We are going to protect the protectors. So thank you, gentlemen, for all of your hard work. And now I'd like to turn it over to the only active fireman in the Senate, and a good friend of mine, Senator Neil Anderson.
Well, thank you everyone for being here today, and thank you to Governor Pritzker and Acting Director Brendan Kelly for helping us with this legislation. As the previous speakers have said, this is a bipartisan effort, and it very well should be. This is a law, this is a bill that is going to strengthen Scots law. And back in 2006, when I was in the fire academy, I remember hearing about Lieutenant Gillen, who was a Chicago fireman that Scots law was named after. This is one of the scariest things that any first responder can imagine going to work. As police officers, you kind of expect to go into dangerous situations, and as a fireman, we expect to go into dangerous situations. But you never think about, taking care of somebody on the side of a road and having to worry about a car hitting you, which is one of the scariest things a first responder can imagine. So thank you to all the sponsors, to all the legislators in working in this in a bipartisan way, and I will turn this back over to Governor Pritzker for questions and answers.
Thank you, Senator. Happy to take any questions you may have.
I hear enhanced penalties at the Capitol, and I also hear at the Capitol anytime it's brought up, no. There seems to be a caucus that's against enhanced penalties. What's your message to those individuals who may see this as one of those bills where they just don't want to vote for it? Similar to, I believe a couple of weeks ago, there was a bill to enhance penalties for people who blow through extended stop arms on school buses. There was a heated debate saying, this isn't right, we shouldn't enhance penalties or whatnot. So for those who do oppose this, what would be your message?
I don't think there will be much opposition to this, but I would just say that this is an important piece of legislation for us to pass. It's the right response to what's happened. We want to send a message to everyone out there that this is extraordinarily important. Remember, beyond the enhanced penalties here, we're also going to help educate the public. We're making sure, we've had conversations I have directly with the Secretary of State to make sure that all of the information that gets put out to new drivers, to people who are re-upping their license and have to take a test, that they understand Scott's law. And we're going to make sure that the funds that come in from the fines that are issued go to educating the public. So that's a hugely important part of the bill. I also think the enhanced penalties are reasonable. There was a lot of discussion here, and I think a good compromise was reached. I honestly think that on both sides of the aisle, we'll see a very strong vote.
Can you explain what the penalties are and go to, or what the bill number is, or any of those?
Sure, I'm happy to turn it over to one of the sponsors.
What's the bill number?
1862? Senate Bill 1862. It's currently in the House right now. The amendment that was put on it for 18, it just increases the minimum fine from $100 to $250. It imposes an additional $250 assessment as well. It also makes Scott's law a violation that results in damage to a vehicle, a Class A misdemeanor, or a violation that results in injury or death, a Class 4 felony. It also, in violation of a list of aggravating factors that may be used in sentencing for reckless homicide, it gives the judge the discretion. Increases the penalty from reckless homicide conviction based on violation of Scott's law that results in the death of a firefighter or emergency medical services personnel to a Class 2 felony from a Class 3. Clarifies language of Scott's law and applies to the language to the requirements for approaching a disabled vehicle. Creates a move-over task force to examine best practices for enforcement of Scott's law and similar statutes. Requires the Secretary of State to include a question about Scott's law on written driver's license examinations.
Is the 250 surcharge on every charge? Is it like really a $500 fine now?
Yes.
It's $500?
Yes.
The second offense would be, you said $750, and then that would also include a $250?
No, right? Well, the imposes an additional $250 assessment on that. It went up from $100 to $250, and then the assessment of $250.
What's the assessment for?
Pardon?
What's the assessment for? Does that go into a special fund or something?
Yes.
Scott's Law Fund.
Scott's Law Fund.
Which pays what?
Education.
Education.
The second offense, though, that also goes up, is that right?
Yes. 750.
750, okay. And that includes the 250?
Yes.
And the second offense?
So the idea was to make it similar to work zone violations?
Go ahead and come up with the mic.
I'll just do it real quick. The idea in the negotiations, in the bipartisan negotiations, was to make it similar to work zone violations that currently exist. That's what exists if you violate the work zone restrictions or work zone speed. So that's what it does.
Is there any allowance, sometimes when you're driving an automobile, this happened to me, you have a truck in front of you, you can't see anything but the back of the truck. The truck moves over, you can see an officer at the side of the road making a stop, but you can't pull over because there's another truck behind him in the left lane, and you're kind of forced to stay there.
Yeah, that would not be a violation. What we did is we clarified the definition of a violation of Scott's law to make sure that in that situation, you slow down, but if you can't, if it's a danger to you or other members of the public by moving over and you can't do it, that would not be a violation.
Director Kelly, is this going to add like additional duties to state troopers' days? You know, are they instructed to pull over more people, and would they be risking missing, you know, maybe speeders or other classic violations?
Well, as you can see from the number of violations that have been issued this year, they've been very busy, and it has not had a negative impact on their ability to enforce other laws. And frankly, these are often co-occurring offenses in the sense that the DUI is probably occurring at the same time someone's violating Scott's law, they're speeding, or they're failing to reduce speed, or they are texting, distracted driving. All those things are often occurring at the same time as Scott's law. I think what this will do is strengthen the position of this law in the middle of all these other potential offenses that may exist. This will have a stiffer penalty. It'll be something that people think about in addition to wearing their seatbelt, in addition to not texting. They're also going to be thinking now more about making sure that they're moving over for first responders. So I don't think it will pose any additional duties on the men and women that are out patrolling the streets in this state, whether it's the Illinois State Police or any other law enforcement. It's not just the ISP that will be enforcing this. This is every law enforcement agency in the state of Illinois that will be able to enforce this.
Does it apply just to the highways, or what if you have someone pull
Everywhere.
over in an intersection?
Everywhere.
Okay.
Are you considering any other policy changes at the ISP in terms of what an officer does
Sure.
in a traffic stop?
So I think that's the point of this task force. There's already been a tremendous amount of internal discussions over the past few months. As I've gone and visited every district in the state, it comes up at every single stop, and we have a thorough discussion about the techniques that people are using, how long they're spending on the side of the road. I think this task force that is required to report back to the General Assembly at the end of this year will bring a whole bunch of different stakeholders together, IDOT, other entities. Is it traffic patterns that influence this? Is it the way where we put rumble strips? Is it the technology that's being used to detect speed, not just in front of a vehicle, but behind a vehicle? Should there be cameras in different angles, not just facing ahead, to be able to get the evidence that you need to be able to prosecute these offenses? So I think there's going to be a whole host of things that will come out of this that will improve the effectiveness of Scott's law, the ability to enforce it. But ultimately, the point of all of it is to be able to protect the men and women that are out there and doing their job. And I think even something as simple as how long it takes to clear a traffic incident, how long do you take doing that motorist assist? How long does it take to fill out all the crap you got to do in a computer, the paperwork that has to be done? How can we create efficiencies there? The longer you're sitting on the side of the road, the odds are increasing that something bad is going to happen. So if we can decrease that turnaround time, get them back out moving and not sitting there like targets, and where the position of a vehicle may be on the side of the road, those are all factors that are being discussed, and I think there's going to be some excellent best practices that will come out of that.
Director, would you consider pulling over that lady who was texting?
No. I think I'll leave it up to the guys with the big loud sirens. So they'll do it.
Insulated people out there, they don't know the weather, they don't consume any news. Do you think through word of mouth that word gets around when you enhance fines, and maybe it reaches those people who are
I think enforcement,
not connected to the rest of us?
enforcement and education go hand in hand, and I don't think it's as simple as one or the other. I think the funds that will be generated by this will in turn go towards that education, and the use of seatbelts is a really great example. No one used to wear seatbelts. There also used to not be breathalyzer technology, but that technology was developed. People were educated about why you needed to wear a seatbelt. I think the more that we keep on message, and that's exactly what this law will help do, and that's what the funds generated from it will help do, that's going to increase people's awareness. I personally think, and maybe I'm being Pollyannish about this, I think already just the fact that this has been discussed as much as it has this year seems to be having an impact on people's driving conduct. And I think the additional enforcement is also doing that.
Off topic.
Any other questions about Scott's law? Happy to take other questions.
A couple of Democrats have come out and talking about the progressive income tax package that the Senate sent over. They seem to have real concerns about the lack of property tax relief, not just a cap or a freeze, but actual relief. What do you say to them and raising these concerns vocally?
Well, I've had conversations with legislators who have different ideas about what ought to be included. As you've seen, there hasn't yet been a rates bill introduced in the House. I said from the very beginning that this would be a process of negotiation. This is part of that negotiation. You saw that the Senate had a slightly different take on what the rates bill should be than what I proposed. No doubt the House will have a slightly different variation as well, but I'm very confident that we'll be able to get it passed.
Governor, the States Attorneys Association is saying that only the governor can clear somebody's record, and therefore what's being considered for social justice in the marijuana bill, the legislature doesn't have the power really to expunge all those records. Do you see that as a problem getting this passed? Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
Well, courts can expunge records. Just to be clear, but the legislature can create a process for that, and that's in fact what this bill does. So there's continuing negotiation discussion about what that expungement piece will look like, but we're listening to law enforcement and we're listening to our colleagues on both sides of the aisle to make sure that the bill addresses both the need for expungement and the process for doing it.
Piggybacking off Bernie, he mentioned, Senator Bergman mentioned the expungement issue. He also mentioned he didn't agree with where the money was going for that cannabis bill. He also said there were no Republican ideas present in that Republican bill. Do you have a response to that?
Sure. Well, Senator Bergman was in a number of those conversations in the working groups. So were a few other Republicans. Their ideas certainly were listened to and incorporated. They had plenty of opportunity to make them known. Some of those ideas are in the bill, but what's very important is that as you put forward a bill, there are going to be disagreements about it, even when you put it forward, and adjustments are being made, and we've got a couple of weeks here, or at least over the course of May here, for us to make sure that we get it right and hopefully address concerns that others have. But suffice to say that we're very confident about what we put forward. Remember, expungement is also part of something that I said from the very beginning, which is that this needs to be about equity as much as anything, that we need to focus on the criminal justice reform aspects of it, the safety aspects of it, and indeed lots of that was included in the bill, and you heard when I made my announcement along with the legislators about it that those provisions were included. So there'll be adjustments that get made over the coming weeks.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Always a pleasure.
John.